Today in our 1999 Dodge Ram pickup, we'll be installing the Firestone Ride-Rite air helper springs, part number F2071 from Firestone. With nothing installed in the vehicle and no air helper springs on it, we had an initial measurement of 36 inches from the ground to the top of the fender well. Once we added our water tank, with approximately 900 gallons in it, our new height was 33 3/4 inches. Now for video purposes, we've already gone ahead and put our vehicle up on a lift, as well as remove the rear tires. We need to first put together the air helper spring and its brackets. We'll do it over here on a bench. We'll need to remove the two plastic caps that sit on top of the stud. Then we'll need to go ahead and take the top bracket. We'll slide the two studs through the opening, making sure that the large hole in the top bracket lines up with where our air fitting will go. Next, we'll go ahead and install our 3/8 flange hex nuts onto them, and then torque them down to the manufacturer's specification. We'll then go ahead and take the bottom bracket, and we'll use a 3/8 by 3/4 inch hex flange bolt that already has some thread sealant on it. We'll go ahead and loosely install this so that we can still slide the airbag back and forth, as we'll need to make some adjustments later. Now that we have the top and bottom bracket attached to the airbag, we're going to need to put the top air fitting in. This is the air fitting that is a 90-degree elbow and has some thread sealant already on it. We'll go ahead and tighten it down so that the thread sealant is well into the threads. You want to make sure that you tighten this air fitting down securely so that you engage the orange thread sealant. Now with this done, now we can go ahead and we're going to start over here on the driver's side. Now the kit comes with either 1/2 inch or 1 inch bracket strips or shims that help you level out the air helper spring. In our case, we'll need to use the 1 inch spacer bracket on the front of the air helper spring. On the rear, we will not need to use anything. It's also a good idea to point the outlet, or the part where you'll be connecting the air tubing, towards the rear of the vehicle on whichever side you're doing. So in this case, we're doing the driver's side, so we want to make sure we point this towards the rear. Now because our top brackets don't reach the frame since our rear suspension is hanging, we're going to go ahead and make up a quick fix. To do this, we'll take a very small piece of airline tubing. We'll then put it into the valve that we just screwed into the top of the airbag. We'll then use the Schrader valve fitting and put it on to the small section of airline. Once we have our quick setup made, we'll go ahead and put some air into it. We'll add small amounts until we get the right height. We want to make sure that all 4 bolts will match up on the frame. Now once we have this done, we'll need to go ahead and mark the 4 holes that we'll need to drill through the side of the frame. Now on the driver's side here, there is a brake line as well as some electrical wires behind it that you need to be careful you don't drill through. Now once we have our 4 locations marked, we'll go ahead and drill them out. We'll ultimately need to drill out to a 3/8 hole. It's a good idea to start small and gradually step up to a 3/8 bit. The hardware used for each of the 4 locations for mounting the upper bracket to the frame is a 3/8 by 1.5 inch hex bolt, as well as a 3/8 flat washer, and also a 3/8 flange hex nut. Now you'll notice that one of the locations there's a pretty good gap from the indention on the vehicle's frame. In this location, we'll actually use 2 of the 3/8 flat washers supplied with the kit to take up the gap. Once we have all 4 of these on, we'll go ahead and tighten them down and then torque them to the manufacturer's specification. Now for the bottom brackets, our 3/8 by 7 inch carriage bolts are way too long, so we're going to go ahead and put them in and measure where we need to cut them off. Now it's a good idea to go ahead and find another nut that'll thread down past the 3/8 carriage bolt where you're going to be cutting it, so that once you make your cut, you can back a nut back off and make sure that the threads are still good. Once we've got all 4 of our carriage bolts cut down, now we're ready to go ahead and bolt in the lower bracket. We'll put the carriage bolt through the spacer block that's located on the front of the bracket, and finally through the lower 1/2 inch bracket that's in between the main spring pack and the helper spring. On the bottom of the carriage bolt, we'll be putting a 3/8 flange hex nut. Once we have all 4 of these on, we'll go ahead and tighten them and then torque them to the manufacturer's specification. Now once we have everything lined up, now we'll go ahead and tighten down the bolt that goes through the lower bracket into the bottom of the airbag. Once you've got the airbag positioned correctly, go ahead and tighten it down and then torque it to the manufacturer's specification. And that'll do it for the actual installation of the airbag and the brackets. All that's left to do on this side now is to run our airline out to our Schrader valve. Now to mount the inflation valve, we'll actually have to drill a 5/16 hole. Once we have our hole drilled, we'll go ahead and put a flat washer on the inflation valve, then we'll put it through the bumper, followed by another flat washer, followed by the hex nut. We'll go ahead and tighten this down. Now we need to go ahead and route our air tubing from the airbag up to our valve. The kit does come with 2 sleeves that'll give you protection if you need to run it near the exhaust or over any sharp edges. With the sleeve on, we'll go ahead and make our connection to the airbag. To do this, you simply push it into the back of the inflation valve. Gently pull outward to make sure it's fully seated. We'll then go ahead and route our airline to the back where we've installed our inflation valve. We'll use a few zip ties along the way to help secure it. Once we get back near the back, we'll go ahead and use a tubing cutter to give ourselves a good clean straight cut. Now that we've got our length figured out, we'll go ahead and cut the tubing and push it into the back of the inflation valve. That'll do it for the installation on the driver's side. Now for the passenger side, we'll just repeat the same process. Just make sure when you install the valve on the top of the airbag, you point it towards the back. Now that we've completed our installation on both the driver and the passenger side, we're going to go ahead and put some air into each of the airbags and check for leaks using a soapy water solution. Now that we've checked for leaks and none are found, we're going to go ahead and put the tires back on. Now we're going to go ahead and pump our airbags up to about 60 psi, and let's go do the tests again with the water tank and see how the vehicle rides. As you can see now, with about 60 psi in each airbag, the vehicle now sits at about 38.5 inches from the ground up to the opening of the wheel well. When we put our water tank in again, now we go down to about 36 3/4 inches. It's about 3/4 inches higher than it sat before we installed the air springs. And with that, that'll conclude our installation of the Firestone Ride-Rite air helper springs, part number F2071 in our 1999 Dodge Ram pickup.